Hello everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to solve quadratic equations by using the factoring method, or what you call factorization. In the course of this video, you might hear me say factor or factorize, factoring, factorization. Just accept it that I have two styles of language that are mixed up. The American way of saying things and the British way of saying things. So whichever one comes to my mouth, you're gonna hear, but just know it's all about this, factoring or factorization. Okay, so what you have here is the general form of a quadratic equation. Any equation that looks like this, it has the variable squared plus another term of the variable not squared plus a constant term equal to 0. That's a quadratic equation. There are times where the constant term or the terms are not all together on one side. They might be just around the equal sign. You just want to bring them together so they look like this. Okay, so what you need to understand is that in order to solve a quadratic equation, you might think of 3 or 4 methods, but this one is based on factoring, where you can break them into smaller sections and then equate it to each of them to 0 to solve it. So let's go. The first thing is you have to be comfortable with this puzzle. There's a puzzle that factoring a quadratic equation will always bring. I call it the diamond puzzle. That's what my students too would call it. So let's take an example. If I put the number 10 here and I put the number 7 here, and I tell you I want to fill these two boxes, these two spaces, with numbers, and these are the conditions. The numbers that will be here will be such that when I multiply the two numbers together, I will get 10. But when I add the two numbers together, I will get 7. Those are 5 and 2. Puzzle solved. The two numbers are 5 and 2. That's done. So this would be the sum of the numbers, and this would be the product of those numbers. These two numbers that we just found are very essential to solving a quadratic equation that might present us with this puzzle. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to use them for factoring. So another one is, let's say I give you a puzzle that says maybe this is 6 and this is -5. And I say, what two numbers will you multiply together to get 6, but when you add them together, you'll get -5? Well, I know what the answer is. It must be -2 and -3, because the product of these two will be +6, but the sum of these two will be -5. So this is a puzzle you have to practice. If this puzzle cannot be solved, it means the quadratic equation cannot be factored. Okay? Don't try to use factorization for a quadratic equation that generates a puzzle that cannot be solved. Okay, I'm going to show you an example in one of these. One of these will end up giving us a puzzle that cannot be solved. I'm sure you're going to see it as we go on. So let's get down to the very basis of what I'm saying, and we will get the facts out and move on. So I strongly recommend that as soon as you write the quadratic equation you want to solve in this form, quickly make a box where you create the puzzle, but before you create the puzzle, write what your A is for the quadratic equation. As you can see, the A for this quadratic equation is 3. A equals 3. What is the B for this quadratic equation? It's -5. My B is -5. And what is the C for this quadratic equation? It's +2. C equals +2. So you have written the 3 key things you need for solving the quadratic equation. That's what matters, because everything else in a quadratic equation will be the same. You'll have your x squared, you'll have your x, but A, B, and C will just change for all of them. So now create the puzzle. That's your diamond puzzle. What do you put on top? It is the product of A and C. Remember that. It is A times C. And what you put here, it is B. So, every diamond puzzle you create has to follow this rule. The top part will be the product of A and C. The first, the coefficient of x squared, and the very last one, which will be this, the constant term. So, remember it's this times this, that's what you put on top. And right here, it is always the B, the middle term, which is -5. So let's create the puzzle and see what our solutions will be. So I'm going to erase this. Let me put the key here that for the diamond puzzle, you have A times C, and here you have B. So I'm going to put my actual answer here. My A times C will be 6, and this will be -5. So right now, I need to think of two numbers that will give me 6 when I multiply, but when I add them together, I'll get -5. Yeah, those two numbers are -2 and -3. Those are the two numbers. And with that, I am set for this question. I can solve it. See, it's very easy once you solve the diamond puzzle. These are the two numbers that you need. So, you take these numbers and you use them to replace the B in the equation. So see how you factor. You write 3x squared. Instead of writing -5, you write -2. But you put x beside it, because you're breaking down this -5 into -5 and -3. Remember, these two will still be this. So you're just replacing the -5 with these two. So you have -2x, then you move on to the next one, -3x. Then you go back to this, plus 2 equals 0. So you see that 5, let me use a different marker, 5 has been replaced by this. Okay? So 5 has been replaced by that, and that's the most difficult part of solving a quadratic equation by factorization. It's the most difficult part. Once you get that, you can solve the problem. So at this point, I'm just going to rewrite this so I can factor. So I have 3x squared minus 2x minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. So group them. This is something I always tell my students. Leave the middle sign alone. Don't touch it. You want to group in pairs, but do not take the middle sign. Leave the middle sign alone. Now we can factor. So to factor, you ask yourself, you say, what is common to 3x squared and -2x? Well, we know it's x. Only x is common. So we take out the x. And what is left will be 3x minus 2. What is common to this and this? Wait, before you ask the question, write the sign. What is common to 3x plus 1? Looks like there's nothing that will divide this and this. Yeah, because there's nothing, but you don't want to leave yourself confused. 1. Why don't you just take 1? Remember, these are co-primes, okay? This is a prime, this is a prime. If they're co-primes, just say, okay, that they have a common factor of 1. So take that common factor out, put it here, and then just write what is there. 3x. Am I supposed to write plus or minus? This is it. Because there's a -1 that you're taking out of +2. This will leave you with -2. Also remember, a quick check. What is here is what must be here. If you follow this rule of leaving the middle sign alone, whatever is here is what you will always get here. Don't try to get two different signs. You will be wrong. If you're struggling to follow the rule, you will be wrong. If you don't get your answer right, it means you made a mistake in solving this puzzle. You want to go back to the puzzle, because this will always be the same thing as this, always. So now your final answer will be, just pick one of these. You factor this out. That would be 3x minus 2, and you have x minus 1 on the outside. That's another one, x minus 1 equals 0. Once you get here, your solution is there, because This is the rule for using factorization. When you multiply two things together and you get 0, the assumption is that this is 0. That's why 0 times anything will be 0. Or this is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. So it's either this is 0 or this is 0. That's why you can get a 0 by multiplying two things together. A third option is that both of them are zeros. So at least one of them is a 0. So the conclusion is that 3x minus 2 equals 0, or x minus 1 equals 0. So if you solve this simple equation, you will get x equals 2/3 or x equals 1. So a quadratic equation will always give you two answers. Always two answers. Sometimes it's the same number repeated. You can get x equals 1 and x equals 1. That's okay. Okay? But all you have to know is that your answer will always be, you always have two answers to choose from. So I just used the first example to solve this. We will take the same steps in solving the second question. Okay? I'll be right back. Let's get rid of this. So this is our second example. X squared plus 6x plus 9. Let's quickly identify A, B, and C. So we make our box quickly so we can use it for the puzzle. Remember, A is, in this case, A is 1. Okay? Our A equals 1, B equals 6, and C equals 9. That's it. So let's make our puzzle. Remember that A times C is what tells you what will be here. That's 1 times 9, you have 9. And here you have B, which is 6, following this rule. So at this point, what two numbers will you multiply together to get 9? But when you add them, you'll get 6. That's obvious. 3 and 3. So we're going to come here and replace 6 with 3 and 3. So let's factor this. This is x squared plus 3x plus 3x. 3 and 3. Replacing the 6 now, plus 9 equals 0. Remember, write x squared plus 3x, put it in parentheses, write the sign, write the next two terms, 3x plus 9 in parentheses equals 0. So at this point, what we can do now is to factor. What is common to this and this? It's simply x is common. What is left will be x plus 3. Plus, what is common to these two? 3 is common. What is left? X plus 3 equals 0. Just like we did in the other one, these two must always be the same. So you take one of them out. That's x plus 3. And the two that are hanging outside the door, bring the guys in. That would be x plus 3. So at this point, it looks like we have x plus 3 and x plus 3. That happens. So you say x plus 3 equals 0 or x plus 3 equals 0. And that's going to give you x equals -3 or x equals -3. That's it. X equals -3 or x equals -3. Some people say x equals -3 twice. Okay? Whichever way you like to say your answer, that is what you need to do to solve any quadratic equation. Write out A, B, and C, create the diamond puzzle, find these two to replace the B, the middle, and that's it. You factor, you solve. Let's go to number 2. So, for number 2, not number 3 rather, I'm going to erase this. I'm going to erase these because we need another puzzle that the equation will give us. So, example 3. So we have example 3 says 2x squared plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, a quick observation. When you have a quadratic equation like this, it's always a good thing to just look at all the a, b, and c. It looks like all of them are even numbers. If they're all even numbers, instead of you dealing with big numbers, why don't you just divide everything by 2? Or at least by the common factor. Okay? What I would do is just divide everything through, divide this by 2, by 2, by 2, by 2. At the end of the day, you're going to have everything reduced. So my first step, you don't have to do it, but it's better when you're dealing with smaller numbers than larger numbers, because you may not be able to factor right, or you might just have a problem. You have too many options when you want to factor. So it's better to divide through. So I'm going to just divide everything by 2 at this point. So divide this by 2, divide this by 2, divide this by 2, divide this by 2. So I'm left with x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals 0. Now this is my new quadratic equation from this. Okay? So now, what is my a? A is 1. What is b? B is 2. And what is c? It's negative 3. So at this point, I need to create the puzzle. The top will be 1 times negative 3, which will be negative 3. And the bottom will be 2. Question. What two numbers will I multiply together to get negative 3? It has to be 3 and 1. Definitely. One of them will be negative. Okay. So I know it's either negative 3 times, so I want to get negative 3. So it's either negative 3 times 1 or negative 1 times 3. Which of these, if I change this sign to addition, will give me 2? It's this one. So the puzzle I need to solve is negative 1 and 3. So I was able to figure that out. Now I know. See, if I had not reduced this by 2, the options will be a lot more. So you want to reduce your options so you don't waste time on it. So at this point, I'm going to replace 2 with negative 1 and 3. So let's factor. You have x squared, negative 1 is minus 1x, which is minus x, plus 3x, minus 3 equals 0. So I do this, leaving the middle sign. Always leave the middle sign alone. That will not change. So what is common to x squared and x? I factor that's x into x minus 1. Put the sign out. Plus, what is common here? It's 3. And that will be x minus 1 equals 0. So if you factor, you have x minus 1 equals 0. Sorry, x minus 1 into x plus 3 equals 0. So as you can see, if we choose to solve this, you have x minus 1 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. So you have x equals 1 or x equals negative 3. That's how that works. So you can see, you just learned something. Sometimes if all the terms in the quadratic equation are multiples of a number, you know, maybe multiples of 2, multiples of 3, multiples of 4, then just divide through by that. 0 can take anything. You always remain with your 0. So you're just concerned with this, because if you divide 0 by anything, you end up with 0. So don't worry about that. Just worry about the quadratic portion of it, okay, itself. So that's the solution to that. I'm going to move on to this example and then this example. Okay, remember, the most important thing is to remember this and know what your A, B, and C are and how to use the diamond puzzle, and you'll be able to factor and solve all quadratic equations that are factorable. Let's go to number 4. Okay. Okay, let's take this out. Take these out, and we're good. So, for example 4, it says that 2x squared minus x minus 1. Example 4, you have 2x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. Well, a here is 2, b is negative 1, c is negative 1. let's create the puzzle. The top part will be a times c, which will be 2 times -1, which is -2. The bottom part will be -1. So the question is, what two numbers will you multiply to get -2? It has to be 2 and 1, but one of them has to be negative. So, but which one will be negative? Because this is a negative number, the bigger number will be negative, which is 2. So you're multiplying 2 and 1, but the 2 will be negative because you want to have a negative outcome when you add. So you have -2 and 1, +1. So you're going to replace this with -2 and 1, or -1 and 2, or 1 and -2. Whichever way you go, you'll always be right. You'll be fine. Okay? Some people have said, do you arrange this so that this would be here? Well, if you see that, you could do that, but it doesn't mean anything because you could switch it. Just to get things clear, I'm going to switch this to 1 and -2. 1 and -2, and see how it will fit here. Because now the -2 is far away from the 2. So let's see. This is 2x squared plus x minus 2x minus 1 equals 0. So let's factor. This would be 2x squared plus x. Leave the sign, okay? Don't take the sign along with anything, just leave it in the middle. And this will be 2x minus 1 equals 0. So what's common to this? It's going to be x, just x is common. That's x into 2x plus 1. What is common here? Well, remember to write the sign first. What is common to 2x and -1? When they don't have anything in common, you say there's 1 because they will be divisible by 1. Write the 1 beside it and just write what's in there, 2x. However, this sign will change because you're dividing -1 by -1. It will become positive. Remember, it has to be the same thing as this. Okay? So, equals 0. So at the end, you have this is the same as this. You factor that. You have 2x plus 1. And bring the boys outside in. X minus 1 equals 0. So we can solve this and say 2x plus 1 equals 0, or x minus 1 equals 0. This, when you solve, will give you x equals -1 over 2, or it would be x equals 1 from that side. Okay, so that's how that one goes. And one final example, and we will be good. Let's do this. So the final example is this one. We're just going to write the question. That's example 5. It says x squared plus 3x plus 6 equals 0. Quickly, what is A? A is 1. What is B? B is 3. What is C? C is 6. So we want to make the puzzle. It is 1 times 6. 6 is on top here, and you have 3 here. So what two numbers will you multiply to get 6? But when you add them together, you'll get 3. No. Let me show you all the options you have to get 6. To get positive 6, you have to multiply 6 times 6. When you add them together, you're going to get 12. 6 times 1 rather. What was I saying? 6 times 1, you add together, you get 6. So that doesn't look like this. What about -6 times -6 times -1 rather? You'll end up with -7. This is 7, sorry. So, what about -3 times -2? You end up with -5. What about +3 times +2? You end up with +5. None of these is ever going to lead you to 3, which means this is one of those questions you cannot solve using factorization. You have to use another method. One method I would recommend is completing the squares. You want to learn that in my next video because that's what I'm going to talk about. Completing the squares will help you solve this, and from there, we will obtain the quadratic formula and you will be happy. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for learning. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And leave a comment so at least I know how to make my videos better. Once again, my name is Newton Okewoye. I'll see you in the next video. But until then, don't stop learning, because those who do have stopped living.